Welcome to BIMS TV. I'm Salome and this is BIMS Bites, and today I'll be biting into kelp. Many of you may have encountered kelp stranded on the beach, like in this photo, which is how I encountered kelp first when I moved to Canada's west coast. I remember avoiding it because it looked yucky while it was rotting on the shore. Little did I know that I would fall in love with kelp after 2018 when I led a research project studying deep water ecosystems in the Galapagos and accidentally discovered an unknown kelp forest to this region. My team and I were baffled when we saw this productive system hiding at 50 meters, beaming with life. And that's when I realized I need to learn everything about kelp forests. So what's the deal with kelp? Kelp, even though they look like plants, are a type of algae. And algae represent a large and diverse group of photosynthetic multi-unicellular organisms. These include phytoplanktons, such as diatoms and microalgae that live inside of corals, and macroalgae, also known as seaweeds, which are categorized into red, green, and brown seaweeds, and kelp are in the latter group. Kelp's morphology consists of a holdfast that holds them down to the substrate, and then a stipe that looks like a stem, and out of these come blades, and many of these together are called fronds. Some kelps have air bladders that allow them to float, and there are around 112 types of kelp species out there, and we're still discovering new ones, like the one in the Galapagos may be a new kelp, still figuring this out. Among the most famous kelps are giant and bull kelp, and these are the ones that have flotation devices and can form these amazing floating canopies. In fact, giant kelp is the fastest growing seaweed in the world, growing 2 feet per day. But the smaller kelps also form important types of canopies. The ones that are close to the ground are called prostate canopies, and the ones with a tall stipe are called stipited kelps. And kelps tend to grow where there is hard substrate and enough light can reach it, which is why they tend to be on the coastlines where it's shallower. They need cold water and high nutrients, which is why kelp forests globally are distributed in the cold parts of the world in the high latitudes. And if you notice in the equator, there is, and which is where the tropics are, there's no kelp. And that's where tropical coral reefs tend to dominate, which is why finding this novel tropical kelp population in the Galapagos is so exciting. So stay tuned into my work. Now, kelp forests are really important because they are ecological hotspots for biodiversity. They are very productive primary producers, supporting very large food webs, and they provide habitat, shelter, and food for a myriad of species. So they tend to support high levels of biodiversity, not just in the kelp forest, but also in other ecosystems where their nutrients get exported out to by currents, such as on beaches and in the deep sea. And now we know that in the deep sea, these kelp detritus material becomes stored and actually stores CO2 in the deep sea seafloor. So they're important at sequestering CO2, which helps mitigate climate change. Kelp is also delicious, and all species are edible, and they provide a huge potential for sustainable aquaculture. They exist now, but I think it's going to grow a lot in the future. Kelp is also in many products because it has alginate, and this you will find in ice cream and toothpaste. So there's so much potential for kelp, and you don't have to fertilize to farm it. So it can be a very sustainable way of growing food. Now, kelp forests globally, sadly, are on a declining trend, and that's because they are threatened by, one, an explosion of herbivores such as sea urchins, and that's because of the loss of their predators, which include otters and many large fish due to human overfishing. And then there's been a decline in sea stars due to the warming of the oceans and diseases killing these off. And as such, urchins have exploded. And in many parts of the world, including here in Canada, I've seen it myself, urchins are just destroying kelp forests. And then there are marine heat waves, which are more abundant and stronger thanks to climate change. And these are causing these cold water species to deteriorate in many parts of the world, including Australia, which is where this image is from a 2010 and 2011 heat wave. But the good news is that scientists are finding that in many of these parts, these forests are coming back. So it shows that kelps are somewhat resilient, and it's really important that we keep researching this and studying their ecology so that we can provide valuable information to managers so that we can increase their resilience in the future. And with this, I conclude, and I encourage you to put on a wetsuit and go and snorkel out there, because these kelp forests are amazing. And if you have more questions, feel free to contact me here, and stay tuned with Black and Marine Science and the many online platforms. Thank you for your time.